What moment you realize you were in love? Story 1. When he kissed someone else in front of me and I felt like I was going to vomit and pass out. He was a coworker. We weren't dating, and I never had such a strong physical reaction before. Story 2. We had known each other for 3 years at that point, but had never really hung out one-on-one before. We ran into each other at a bar after we both showed up to hang out with the same person. We stayed at the bar talking to each other until it closed down that night, and I asked her out to dinner the next night to continue the conversation. At that dinner, I counted as our first date, we were about 3 hours into a conversation. I have no idea what we were talking about at that point, but she was smiling and looked so happy, and the corners of her eyes crinkle up when she really, genuinely smiles. And I had this overwhelming feeling at that moment that I loved this person. We got engaged last week. Edit. I wrote this as I was in a rush to get out the door, but it took off, so I'll add more to the story. Just a heads up for anyone who's lactose intolerant. This might get cheesy. We met on the first day of law school and had all of our first-year classes together. We ran in the same social circles, but are both pretty quiet and reserved. We each were in relationships when we met, but mine ended a few months after that. Hers did too, but I had no idea. I had thought she was really nice and really cute, but that she was out of my league, so I stuck to dating apps. Apparently, she thought I was out of her league too. We were together in a group of law students once, and I was explaining a surprise I had planned for the girl I was dating at the time. She told me later that she heard those plans and thought, damn, I need to find a guy like this. Eventually, we both end up single and with a semester of law school left. We each had given up on the idea of dating after a few bad relationships, for me, and constant stream of bad dates, for her. I had actually deleted my Tinder and Bumble accounts the week before our first date. One Friday night, a friend of mine texted me to come to a bar to play pool with other law students. I was already in sweatpants, drinking a beer and playing Siege, so I wasn't interested. This friend started listing off the people that were there, and one was someone I hadn't done anything fun with in a while. In the meantime, another guy is texting my future fiancée, trying to get her to come to the same bar. She's at home alone, already in sweatpants, and doesn't want to go out into the cold. The guy tells her that her old roommate is there. My future fiancé hasn't gone out with this old roommate in a month, so decides to come play pool. The roommate was the friend that I wanted to hang out with. We're standing around drinking and talking, when I hear her mention something about a Disney movie. I still think she is out of my league, but I do always enjoy talking to her and am a huge Disney fan, so I join in. We hit it off and spend the next several hours talking about Disney movies and trips to Disney World. At the end of the night, I ask her if she wants to get dinner and talk more about Disney World. To my surprise, she says yes. That first date, we talked about how our families used to go to Disney every year. We realized we had even been in the same park on the same day 17 years ago, which was crazy. We joked that it would be nice to go together sometime. I asked her on a real date, and that was that. We went through a lot of very, very good relationship-building experiences together. She ended up moving in with me fairly quickly because it just felt weird not to be together. We perfectly complement each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we make each other better people. I ended up proposing to her in Disney World the other week. It was really the perfect place considering how this started. Story 3. We'd been dating for a bit. I tickled her. She elbowed me on reflex. I spit my tooth out. She cried. I cried. For a different reason. We went to the dentist. That was the day. It's also my favorite story. Story 4. When I truly, genuinely realized that I valued his happiness as much as my own. He was telling me about his plans and ambitions, and I was excited for him, and absolutely thrilled when they progressed in any way. I love him so much, his happiness really means the world to me. Story 5. I was on a date with my now wife, and we were looking for this dessert place called The Chocolate. For the life of me, I could not find it even though I've been there before. After probably 10 minutes, we finally saw the sign, and I loosely quoted Aladdin. "Ah, there it is," in Jafar's voice, and immediately my date said, "That's it? That's the place we've been looking for?" in Iago's voice. I just looked at her with cartoon hearts floating around me. It was destiny. Story 6. We were dating. I had a rough day. She just held me really tight and I started crying. So mad that I couldn't control my emotions and struggling with clinical depression and upset that having a girlfriend wasn't enough to cure my bouts of depression. She read my mind holding me there, told me, I know. but it's okay. I'll always be here. Fixing it isn't something I can do, but I can make sure you're never alone while you fight. I loved her then, and some small part of me always will. Not in the same way, 5 years later she left me, but I still love the part of her that defined what love is for me. At least I know what I'm looking for now. Not a girl who will fix me, but a friend who knows they can't but is still willing to be there with me while I fight. Story 7. Without me asking for it, she sent me her pillowcase because it smelled like her. To Afghanistan. It meant more than I can explain. Edit. Well, it looks like this is taking off, so additional information for you. I married the ever-living out of that woman. She smacked me when I showed her this. Our second daughter is due in a few months, and I still have that pillowcase. Story 8. We both moved into the same co-ed housing first-year university. Neither of us knew anybody else, and there were 6 of us in the house. I was unpacking my stuff, and he swung by my room to chat at the exact moment I pull out the head of a dragon figurine that my godmother made me, body still in the box. Without saying a word, he ran down to his room and grabbed his superglue. When he came back up and fixed it, all I could think was that I'd found my knight in shining armor, protecting his lady and her dragon. I let him touch my a week later. Story 9. The very first night he and I hung out, we talked nonstop until 7 the next morning. That next day, I had to go to work at 10 a.m. I got to work and I had never felt so awake in my life. Almost 5 years later, and I still get that feeling when I'm with him. Story 10. Maybe 20 years ago, so I was dating this woman and things had gotten serious enough that we were doing Christmas with my family. It was late in the evening, hours after dinner, and during that time when everyone's sitting around drinking beer, wine, and playing cards or something, we were just talking about stuff in general, and somehow the subject of underground homes came up. This is where I made a mistake. Everybody knows that when you are in a relationship with someone, especially a new one, you have to be careful not to tell them what you really think. It's just known that you try to present as normal of a face to them as possible, and part of that means hiding the things that really interest you. That's kind of what we're taught, at least, right? If you don't do this, then respective meat sees all the weird stuff and will probably nope out of there to find someone less strange. This is one of the reasons why hanging katanas and anime scrolls from the walls of your apartment might be contraindicated, for example. So I made a mistake. I accidentally told her that I was interested in the idea of maybe someday building an underground home. Almost immediately, I realized this was a problem. I just told this woman that I thought underground houses were interesting and that I could see myself living in one. That's the kind of thing a crazy person says. That's not what normal people talk about. Conversation moved on to other subjects, and I hoped that she hadn't really heard me. The next morning, we got onto the freeway to head back to Los Angeles, and we had a 12 to 15-hour drive ahead of us. As we entered the highway, she started talking. About last night. You mentioned that you were interested in underground houses? Shit. If we were going to have this talk, if we were going to get into an argument and I was going to have to defend myself or figure some way to worm my way out of this without her thinking that I was a total loser, it would have been better if it was near the end of the drive, but no. I was trapped in this car for the next eternity, and this drive was going to suck. I was thinking, she continued, do you think it might be possible to purchase those steel shipping containers to use as the structure? I don't know if they are strong enough to hold dirt on top of them, but it seems like it might be worth researching. What? What? Not only was she not judging this idea, she was contributing to it. We spent the next few hours brainstorming, and it was one of the best road trips I've ever had. Oh, aftermath. I married the out of that woman. We have a house, above ground for now, 2 teenagers, a dog, and enough cats, and we love the heck out of each other. Once in a while, we take a look at land prices outside of town or watch for deals in earth-moving equipment because one of these days, we'll start digging. Together. Story 11. He used to be my co-worker, and I heard that he was leaving in a few months. My stomach dropped, and I was so sad. Him and I weren't even that close, but I really didn't want him to go because he's just so admirable and so sweet. I knew I wanted him in my life. I wanted him to always be by my side. A few days after that, I checked my schedule and I saw that I was working with him. I oddly got really nervous, and apparently, a few minutes before he was supposed to come in, my other co-workers told me that my face was really red. That's how I find out, and everyone found out that I had a crush on him, aka my current boyfriend. It's been a year since then. Story 12. All my social awkwardness and anxiety disappeared. and we spent hours just talking and laughing. She was instantly my best friend. We were like kids, laughing at the dumbest things, annoying everyone around us. I knew she was the one. That was the first day I met her. Now we've been married for 7 years. Story 13. We were co-workers at a bar restaurant when we met. I was adamant we were just friends and that I didn't have a crush on her. But one night, something crazy happened. I forget exactly what, it's been several years, and I immediately started doing laps around the place trying to find her to tell her. I can't find her to save my life. Turns out we were both circling the restaurant looking for the other person. Edit. Thank you for the silver. My fiancé is also a Redditor and is excited that so many people enjoy our story. Story 14. Watching him build a fort with my 2 kids, unprompted from me, simply because they asked him to. It was a huge step to begin with to even let him meet them, since their dad is a total who left 5 years ago and hasn't seen them since. That made me apprehensive to let anyone meet them with the possibility of him leaving too and hurting their little hearts anymore. He now loves them as much as he loves me, and we couldn't be happier. Story 15. I got worried when she would fly on a plane. I'm a rational man, and I know that it's super unlikely that her plane would have any issues at all. But for some reason, I worry when she gets on one. I also cry like a little when she leaves. Story 16. Few years back, I was about to meet my girlfriend for the first time in 3 months. We were counting down the days. But the moment I walked out of that airport and I saw her standing there for me, all I saw was her in that bright red dress in front of that overcast background, as if the rest of the world was hazy. Very movie-like, if I'm being honest. And when she hugged me, it just felt right. Like it was all worth it and everything was going to be all right. Standing there surrounded by her warmth and smell, it seemed like she must be the special one if my sight automatically blurs out everything else when I see her. Too bad it didn't last. Story 17. When your happy place is thinking of them. Whenever I'm anxious or down, I'll think about the way his neck smells like or him being in my arms. It helps getting through a bad day. Story 18. When she told me she genuinely thought mermaids were real and that we had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see them at a kids' aquarium show and I didn't immediately dump her. Story 19. Oh man, it was nearly 9 years ago. When we met, my girl didn't like me. Apparently, when I was trying to be fun, I came off as scary, and so it took some time. I was patient with her, and eventually she tolerated me. So I was out with my then-girlfriend and ate some bad Mexican food and ended up with food poisoning. I was staying over at my GF's, sleeping on the couch because I felt like absolute trash for 3 days. I could barely move. One morning I woke up and there she was, all snuggle against me. My girl. My then GF walked through the room, trying not to disturb us, and my girl growled at her, protective of me. It was right then that I knew I loved her. After my GF and I broke up, I didn't see my girl for a couple years. But then I got the call, it wasn't working out with the new guy, and I was asked if I wanted her. I didn't hesitate. So I adopted my dog nearly 6 years ago and never looked back. She's asleep on my lap as I write this. My little girl and we still very much love each other. Story 20. My family had a golden retriever that was absolutely terrified of fireworks. My SO and I were staying up late one 4th of July night playing Bingo Battle from Pikmin 3. We were in the living room when he turned to me and asked, "Do you smell that?" We both turn around and see that my sweet golden retriever shat all over the floor rug. There was a quiet utterance of, "Oh my God," from me. It was quite the blowout, as you can imagine a doggy stress would be. Without hesitation, my SO immediately sprung to his feet, opened the door, and started to move the entire 5x7 carpet outside to rinse it down. I took Ms. Poopy Butt outside to rinse off her skirts and tail, as well as some cuddles, reassurance. I knew in that moment that I loved that man and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. He leapt into action for a stinky dog that was not his nor his responsibility. Just knew she needed help. He was also there while that golden was on her deathbed many years later. This time not only assuring the dog, but my mom as well. He's my favorite. 8 years together in March. Story 21. I remember I had been dating my then-girlfriend for about 3 months. My mom was driving her home and we were in the back seat and cuddling. She was telling me about her family, who was very emotionally abusive. And in a small voice, she said that she wouldn't blame me if I decided they were too much for me and didn't want to be with her. For a second, I thought about not being with her, and my heart felt like it broke into a million pieces. I immediately felt like sobbing uncontrollably. Yeah, I was in love with her. It's too bad we didn't last for longer than 3 years. We had something special. Story 22. Catching myself smiling like an idiot every time I get a text from them or seeing their photo come up on my screen, even though I know there's a 90% chance it's a butt dial. Constantly thinking about them or noticing how my heart races when we spend time together. Caught the feels hard. Story 23. When she got back with her long-distance and emotionally abusive boyfriend. Got really, really dizzy. Fought for her. She left him. We are married, edit. All right, here's the full story, as promised. It's a long one. So, my junior year in college, I transferred to a school closer to my apartment. Because the school I used to go to was on quarters and my new one was on semesters, there was so major miscommunications and odd discrepancies with transferred classes. Long story short, I ended up in an acting class by mistake. So I thought, A at Easy A should be fun anyways. First day of class, I'm surveying the room, just to get a feel with who my classmates were. Nobody stood out to me, so I figured I'd just shell up and keep to myself for the semester. Well, 20 minutes into class walks in this beautiful blonde with a little mermaid dress, art supplies in hand. Since I was sitting in the last chair to stay away from everyone, the only available chair was next to me. So, as spunky as she was and still is, she approached me and said, "Hi, I'm Anon and I'm sitting next to you." Uh, okay. I just kinda gawked, smiled, and nodded my head. Well, that week, we had to practice some improv, so we were paired up to do the mirror exercise. We got to chatting and found out she was from 3 hours away and went to this school because nobody she knew was going here. She somehow got my number and texted me that evening regarding homework. "I'm sorry. I know this is weird, but I had to ask so-and-so for your number. Every pair has their own written homework, and you are obviously the only other person in class with the info I need." So, we got to talking more. We clicked. We clicked so well it was the most natural, organic, and perfect click I've ever witnessed in my life. About a week later, she asked me out on a date to go see a play. This is awesome. So we went on several dates, became legitimate best friends, and opened up to each other so much. Fall break comes along. She's about to leave to go home and asked if I could feed her goldfish for her. "Of course I will," I respond. We hugged. She left. We texted all break. Well, when she got back, she was acting really weird. Sort of. Unhappy. Very sad. She came over to my apartment to play guitar together, sing together, and pick up her fish. And when she was leaving, she looked at me with teary eyes. Sly. I got back together with him. Speechless. I got so dizzy, so destroyed, that I forgot to breathe. Oh. Oh, well, good. For you guys, I mumbled. She obviously was not happy with giving the news. From that point on, nothing has changed. I refuse to let things get weird between us. If we were meant to be, it will be. We still hung out every single day, talked religion, faith, life, hobbies, work, school, everything. Most of these things, it turns out, she was mocked for by him for believing in or for particular hobbies. I started my fight. I started being there for her whenever she needed something. I started making little sacrifices for her, helping her with homework, work, driving to work, taking her out for lunch and dinner on occasion, and being all around good to her. I never let it get to the point where it was our nice guys or overbearing, but just enough to let her know that I love her. And she knew. A month goes by, we are still hanging out, and I admit to her one night in the dorm commons, "Anon, I have to say it." She starts crying, begging me to stop. "Don't do this, please. I love you," waterworks. From both of us. We had mutual feelings, it turned out, but she felt so trapped and so stuck that it ate away at her. We felt like nothing will ever happen between us. But I still was there. I didn't give up. I didn't let us drift apart. And she, the same. Another month goes by and it's winter break. She went to his home state to visit him. He paid for her plane ticket and everything. It destroyed me. I was in a very dark place. We would talk on the phone in secret, text in secret, and just try to avoid drama with him. She comes back to my area, and she asked me to train her in boxing. I was a trainer. So that's more time we have together, more bonding. We get more and more intimate as best friends can get. Our evenings extended from after class or work till 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 8 a.m., 10 a.m., and just drive to class without a second of sleep. We would stay up for hours every single night just talking about our hearts, playing chess, or writing music on our guitars, talking about awful relationships and how unhappy they made us, or, in her case, was making her. And no matter how many times she broke up with him, he manages to guilt her into coming back. Finally, one day after the boxing gym, we got showered up, headed back to my place for another inevitable late night of conversation dripping with emotion. That was the night. Fuck it, I said to myself. Fuck this. I'm fucking done. She looked at me from the couch. I was standing, with an inquisitive and suspicious look. I walked up to her, sat on the couch next to her, put my hand on her face, and I kissed her. And she kissed back. She slapped me, of course. She apologized and said, I feel like this wasn't dramatic enough for us. We laughed and kissed. We kissed long, gently, and purely. Best first kiss ever. After that, our relationship exploded past the limitations of being best friends. She left him, and we were, and still are, so in love. We started talking about a post-mortem of the events that happened that long winter. She was always in love with me. She felt so trapped with him, and with her own mental ailments, she was living in. She finally had someone to go to church with. She finally had someone there. She finally had someone who treated her right. And the best news of it all? She never wanted to get on that plane. In fact, she and her mom talked about shredding up the tickets and never looking back. But her demons haunted her. But no more. 5 years later, we got married, and now looking for a house and planning our family. We have a dog, fruitful careers, and a wonderful and happy life. Story 24. When she jumped up onto my bed, laid there looking cute, and she stared at me with those golden green eyes. I was looking into the soul of something beautiful. Then she cuddled me and fell asleep in my arms, blissfully unaware of the cruel world around her, just happy to be there in that moment. I do love that cat. Story 25. I slid through a yellow light after leaving a TGI Fridays and got pulled over. I had had a few and would have probably failed a breathalyzer. Without saying a word, my GF at the time grabbed a handful of pretzels from her bag, chewed them up, took a swig of water, opened the passenger door, and threw up. I told the cop she was sick and I was just trying to get her home. He handed me my license back and said, "Get her home. We've been married almost 17 years. Edit. For all the internet judges that have never done anything wrong. This happened almost 20 years ago. Thank you for your fake internet concern." Story 26. We broke up and I felt like my heart was physically breaking. I couldn't stop crying and neither could he. We got back together 2 months later after trying to just be friends. It's been years now and he's everything. Story 27. My FWB and I got into an argument about her possibly having with her ex. He was emotionally and sexually abusive. She ended up yelling at me and said that we're not even dating. God, what is your problem? Do you like me or not? I then realized that I had been holding back a lot of feelings and that argument forced me to confront it. I apologized and said that I did like her, and I was sorry for how I acted, and that the argument made me realize that I did like her. We've now been dating for almost 6 months, and I'm still trying every day to show her that she's loved and safe with me. I took her for granted, and I hope to never do that again. Story 28. We kissed, and my entire body went numb. After we pulled away, he let out a little laugh, and I knew that was a laugh I wanted to hear every single day. That feeling was a long time coming, but when it happened, it was pure bliss. Story 29. I used to struggle to sleep every night. She sleeps like the dead and has the ability to sleep as much as a house cat. It was about 4 a.m., and I was tossing and turning so much I must have woke her up. So she started taking me through meditation and breathing exercises until I fell asleep. Story 30. We had argued before he left for work, so I angrily ignored it when he called. Almost immediately after that, his boss called and said he had fallen 32 feet from a ladder and was on the way to the ER. I have never felt anything like the fear I felt then. My whole body went cold and I knew it was because I loved him. I drove so fast that I beat the ambulance. He fractured his spine in 3 places and gashed both shins down to the bone. My daughter and I spent her 5th birthday by his side in the hospital. And even through the pain meds, the only thing he worried about was that he had ruined her birthday. And that's when I knew we would be a family. We will celebrate our 15th anniversary in April. Story 31. I don't think there was a singular moment that made me first realize I was in love. I kind of just realized that I was over time. The glow in her eyes when she smiled at me was probably the biggest thing, though. I could see how she felt about me, and I just loved her so much. That glint in her eyes melted my heart beyond measure. It's sad how that changes over time, though, isn't it? The glint fades and is replaced with disappointment and resentment. Alas, if I ever find someone who looks at me the way she did, I know I will make a wonderful boyfriend to them. Story 32. For our first date, we planned to meet for dinner. The dinner went so well we planned to go somewhere for a drink to continue the evening. We drove separately, so I walked her to her car. Before I left to go to my car, we confirmed where we were going, and then she did a playful touch on my chest and then proceeded to trip over the curb walking away. She's now my wife. Story 33. When I almost wet myself laughing. He let me compose myself, then proceeded to make me laugh. 12 years later. Married with 2 kids and 1 on the way. Story 34. This is so long past the OP nobody will probably see it. But I just remember I got up in the middle of the night and was eating cookies that she made for me. And it just all kind of clicked. I'm eating cookies in the middle of the night that woman upstairs made me. Then, what further cemented it was when I got back into bed, she immediately spooned me because she was cold. That happened October 16th, 2018. I still haven't said I love you to her, but I do. Story 35. When I let his dog sleep in my bed, I first suspected. On New Year's Eve, when I offered that we could stay and celebrate with his family, which I could tell he wanted, rather than go to my friend's party as planned, and realizing that his happiness meant my own happiness, that confirmed it for me. 2 years later, we're getting married. Story 36. On our first trip to NYC together, on the front of the ferry coming back into the city. But actually when I was diagnosed with stomach ulcers and other GI problems, and he left a party to come home with me and take care of me through an attack. Story 37. All the songs made sense. Pop, classic crooners, take your pick. At the time, I wasn't able to easily express my emotions. I'd send her a playlist whenever I found something intensely sweet, almost saccharine. Once we started splitting, I made a playlist containing songs of regret and remorse, wanting one more chance to change things around, reminiscing about the good times we had had. Story 38. I can't pinpoint the exact moment for me because it was multiple things, but I know the moment for my husband. We were kissing and he stopped and just said, "I love you." It was pretty early on and I wasn't there yet, so I said, "How do you know?" And he smiled and said, "I just know." Story 39. For me, it was fairly soon after we officially started dating. She had left town a couple weeks during a holiday break, but before she left, she gave me some candy bars in a shoebox. During the break, I found myself just opening the box, to smell her scent, and get all fuzzy inside. Story 40. When you have been dating a while and you see him like every day, but sometimes when you get the chance to just look at them and you just fall in love even more. Love is little steps that build into something beautiful. I knew I loved him when he would do the simplest things to make me happy, or let me play my music anytime we were in the car, or bring me a little baggie of bacon to snack on when I picked him up. Ugh, I love him. Story 41. As soon as I saw a picture of her. Then again when I saw her in person for the first time, I felt like I was falling in love with her over and over again every day for the 2 years we spent together. But it turns out falling in love with someone because of their looks and the attributes that you assign to them instead of paying attention to who they are, is a bad idea. Story 42. We went for a walk in the park. He wanted to climb up the top of the waterfall. I'm terrified of heights but followed him up anyway. Thought to myself halfway up, there's nobody else I would go up this staircase for. Nobody. I'd follow him anywhere. And that's when I realized, oh, I love him. Then he took me back to his apartment for the first time. He listened to me vent about the horrible stuff in my life. Got me to confess to my recent suicide attempt. Told me how much I mattered, how much he cared, how he and his girlfriend were there for me whenever I needed them. And then I went home to cry. Ouch. Edit. This was a while ago. A bunch of stuff has happened since then. But the TLDR of it is that we're a couple and living together now. He's the best stepdad ever. And the then GF is still a good friend to both of us. Still hurt at the time. Story 43. I'm not entirely proud of it, but for the first few weeks my now fiancé and I were dating, I had doubts about us. I just had an extremely tough breakup a few months ago and thought that my fiancé and I were just heading the same direction. A month or so later, I started taking Korean language lessons and, On the first day of class, I was running late. I was panicking because I thought I wouldn't be allowed to enter the class or anger the teacher. Out of panic, I called my boyfriend, who was still sleeping, and started ranting and crying. I thought he was going to get angry at me for waking him up. To my surprise, not only did he get me to calm down, he also stayed awake until I got to class and literally took a seat. I was just so amazed by this. And that's when I realized I really did love him, that I couldn't let this one go. And he really is the most amazing, kindest, gentlest person out there. I love him to bits. Okay, haha, that was cheesy, haha. Sorry. Story 44. Given the extensive history with him, there were 3 distinct moments. We were best friends for 6 years. We spent months talking before meeting in person. We had grown very close and had a lot in common. The first day I met him in person, I knew I was in love with him. We were both dating people at the time but grew close as best friends for the next 6 years. I tried to deny my feelings and kept telling myself I didn't love him. Second moment happened when I was single, and he was still in a relationship. He asked me if I was going to the pumpkin patch that year. I told him I probably wasn't going because I didn't have anyone to go with. He knew how much going to the pumpkin patch meant to me. He asked me to hang out and took me to the mall, but then, on the way home, he said he was taking me to the pumpkin patch. He said he didn't want me to miss out on my favorite holiday activity and wanted to make sure I got to go. He even bought me treats from the pumpkin patch. Those feelings of love kept resurfacing after seeing how much he cared about me. The third moment was when he came over one night to decorate the Christmas tree with me. We ended up just goofing around and were decorating each other with the ornaments and tinsel. I had never had so much fun with anyone. There was a moment where it felt like we were about to kiss. I knew I was in love with him and was tired of denying it all those years. We finally confessed our feelings for each other and have been together for 2 years now. Each and every day I fall in love with him even more. Story 45. I literally could not get mad at him. It didn't matter what he did or said, I couldn't be mad. Granted, I can count on one hand the amount of things he's done in the almost 10 years we've been together that should have made me mad, but haven't. True love conquers all. Story 46. Every time we spent time together, my whole body felt weak and my legs were shaky and my mouth was dry. Every time I wanted to speak to her, it was like giving a presentation to the class, but one I powered through every time just because I wanted to keep communicating with her. Story 47. To me, there's 2 types of love. For the puppy love stuff, that's easy to remember when that moment hits. She made and brought me coffee out of the blue while I was working, just because she's that kind of person. It sounds simple, but it showed the kind of person she was. A sweet and caring individual. I fell in love with that. For the real thing, that sort of love that you know will endure the rest of your life, the kind that's completely selfless, the one that makes you feel pain at the idea that it might ever end, where your idea of the perfect future is shaped around sitting in rocking chairs with them when you're older and watching cars drive by. I can't remember. I just remember being next to her and realizing that everything was different. I was different. I tried to think back and remember if I had a profound feeling, but I hadn't. It just happened. It sounds anticlimactic, but it really doesn't feel that way.